Really, a lot of what it is to learn how to see or tune in to, your own intuition, it's really just practice and having a safe space where you can receive some confirmation that what you're seeing and saying is accurate. Like everything my students saw for the others, they're like, wow, like that makes a lot of sense. And it was uncanny, like some of the things they would pick up on. It's like some very specific information, and they would say, oh, I don't know what this is, like I'm not going to say because it's just weird. And I'm like, no, those are the things you absolutely have to say. Like once I taught a class, I remember there were these two guys, and one of them, I gave the instruction to like say somebody's name that you're close to. So one of them said his father's name, and then the other one across from him was supposed to look at a rose, the image of the flower, the rose, and imagine a rose that represented the guy, the name that he heard, so the guy's father. So he closed his eyes. He's like, well, I don't see a rose, so I don't know what to say. And I'm like, well, what do you see? I'm like, do you see anything? He's like, oh yeah, I see this bizarre stuff. I'm like, well, just say whatever it is. So he's like, okay, I see this car. He described a specific like make and model of a certain car, and he said, and I see this like something about Hawaii. And it turns out that was the guy's car, and he's about to go to Hawaii.
Oh my God.
And so the guy receiving the reading for his father, his jaw was dropped, and the other guy opened his eyes, and I'm like, you see that?
Wow.
But until you try it, you don't know. You don't know that you're accurate. So what I do is I hold a safe space for people, because I've been down the road for so long, it's like, none of it's weird for me. So I can sit with you and have you say whatever you see or whatever you're hearing or whatever, and there's a place for it. Like, and a lot of it starts with symbols or colors, or it's not always like a 3D movie. Like some people think it's supposed to be like a movie, like crystal clear, or if I give the instruction of seeing a rose, if it's not a rose, it's not right. But it's like, no, it's like we all really have our own language, our own intuitive language. Where I did my initial psychic training, I was a poet. I was in graduate school for poetry, and so when I started doing readings, it was like, this is just like poetry. It's just like metaphor, not like always literal. Sometimes it's very straightforward, like if I see something and I feel that I need to be direct, I'll be direct. I'm not afraid to be direct. But a lot of it is actually very metaphorical, and that in some ways it's deeper, it's more rich in the meaning. The initial thing I do is I'll just have somebody say their name, and I'll describe whatever first images come, and I believe like my client is showing me those images. That's what they're on some level broadcasting. That's what's up, or that's what they're wanting help with. And a lot of times I'll do that. I'll talk for a few minutes about the initial images, and then I'll say, okay, what are your questions? They're like, oh, you started to answer my question.
Already, yeah.
Yeah. So, we were talking about focusing on what's life enhancing, or what's going to support the person that you're doing a reading for, or even just in your own life, like when to share certain information and how do you say it. And so it's like a lot of times when I'm doing a reading, not only will I look at how to answer their question in a way that serves them, but even rewriting the question itself. Like, is that really what the person wanted to know? Like, sometimes people are so focused, and that's where it's like when we have trouble meditating and, getting rid of our distractions and really turning in. And sometimes the people who come to see me, they're wanting, and I know this very well, they want information, they want details, they want to know yes or no, like is this or that going to happen, when is this or that going to happen, like I need to know. And in 3D time, in 3D time and space and the physical world that we live in, sometimes we do need to focus on details, but in the realm of like a spiritual reading, it's great to look at, okay, what's really behind the question. So in the topic of a job, like I remember one client, he's like, am I going to get this promotion? That was his big question that he came to ask me. And I was like, well, you don't like your job, do you? He's like, no. And I'm like, well, why don't we look at that? And so once we looked at that, I realized that his promotion was like in the world of being a mechanic, and that's what everybody in his family had been, and he didn't like it. And so I was like, well, what do you want to do? So he wanted to do something creative. So then the reading turned into a process of helping him unblock his creativity and follow his dream. Sometimes it's like, really look at what's going on, like read the energy of the whole situation, and don't get caught by the client or the friend or the partner or whoever it is asking for details. Just because they want details doesn't mean you have to jump on that little, what's the, like mouse on the treadmill thing. Like, you don't have to go there with them. You can be the gift of a bigger perspective. There was a question about being afraid to say things, like when you're picking up intuitive information and somebody was getting very specific about health information, like knowing she had cancer, and the doctors didn't believe her, and she insisted on a mammogram, and then was told she would have been dead in a month if she didn't get surgery right then. So it's like, whoa, like that's a gift. And so when you have that kind of gift, like, and then she said, well, then I'm afraid to actually do it for other people, because what if I'm wrong? And sometimes the things that we're afraid of, that we're the most afraid of, are the things that we're meant to do, that are really our gifts in the world. And whatever our personal story is, whatever we've had a hard time with, it's for a reason. And it's usually because you're meant to share something along those lines. So